Hey, comrades. Hope you're all doing well. We're finally here to talk about. Finally here. We're here to talk about Pioneer. And so, what is Pioneer? Pioneer Squad is Snow White, Rapunzel, and Scarlet. They are the goddesses. What's left of the goddesses? They rebranded themselves as Pioneer, and they just wander the land and like do stuff, and they meet up every once in a while. Kind of like, I wanted to do these guys here because we had Overzone where we got introduced to like them from like the story event, which really focused on Dorothy, but they were there, and then we had them in the story from last time, and then next week is actually going to be a side story. So side stories, there's 3 of them thus far in like May of 2025 after the 2.5 anniversary, and they kind of focus on characters without the commander being there, and they just kind of give you more kind of what's going on in the world and whatnot. But that one focuses heavily on the Pioneer crew as they take Marion to meet with White Knight, and White Knight is kind of the 1.5 year anniversary story. So we want to get through that before we get there, which is, we have plenty of time. Like, we're not even at like the 1 year anniversary yet. Anyway, so we're going to start with the Bond story for Snow White. So finally, after all this time, right? So at some point, the counters are getting ready for a mission, and then we're sitting on an elevator, and Ines and Rappy and Neon are like kind of arguing, and then they're like, "Oh, we got to go grab something," and so they run, and then all of a sudden the elevator just like crashes, like takes off and shoots all the way to the surface and crashes and gets destroyed, and it's like ruh-roh. Now we're stuck on the surface with no way down, and the counters can't come help us, and we're like, shit. And then the Raptures, there's some Raptures, so obviously because they heard like the explosion or whatnot, they're like, "Ooh, what's going on over there?" So we have to scurry up to this area and set off a flare and just kind of hide and hope the Raptures don't find us. At that point, Snow White shows up and she's like, "What up? What up, homie? Take this blanket." So she gives us, I think it's a blanket. It might have been her cloak, her like heating cloak. Anyway, and then we're talking to her about when you get back to the elevator and what's going on and everything. And she's like, "Well, it's a 2-week walk with you as a human to get to the next elevator, so we got to get going." So we go, and then some time goes by, and we start to slow down, and she's like, yeah, we're out of food and water and whatnot. And there's nothing that she knows about for like 30 hours. So she adjusts our movement so that we hit up this farm. At the farm, there's some Raptures she kills, and then we find some water and some expired food. So she goes and eats the expired food because she can't get like food poisoning because she's a Nikke, obviously. And then at some point, she finds some rats. So she smashes them and gives them to us to eat. And then she's talking to us about lack of sleep as well. So we do that, we eat the rat and all that good stuff. Then later on, she's like, "Man, you need sleep, you've been up for like way too long." So she like stuffs us in like a crevice and then like covers us with like the blanket and like watches over us so that we can get some sleep, so that we can actually like survive and whatnot. And then we talked to her about her survival experience and how like everything that's going on and how she's been out here for so long and just surviving and whatnot. And we talked to her about her desire to kill all the Raptures. And then she talks about how she's going to kill everyone, like all the Raptures, and then get to the Queen and kill her too. And that's like her mission and her life goal, and that's all she like is concerned with. And then for another week, we just kind of survive. We eat like bugs and rodents. Like at some point, she's like, "Eat these spiders, are good for you." It's like, Jesus Christ. I drink water we find and whatnot. And we're really struggling to like hang on. And then Snow White mentions that she could carry us, but our concern is that if there's Raptures, she's like, how is she going to defend herself and fight? And then we go on some more, and she's like, "Oh, this area is great. It's got all these trees." And she like tears the bark off, and there's a bunch of slugs, and she's like, "Delicious, isn't it?" It's like, God damn. So we eat the slugs, and then, some more time goes by, and we're continuing to move towards the elevator, and then we come into like a horde of Raptures. Like I think she mentions there's like 100 of them, and then Snow White kills all of them. And then she's out there, and she's like fixing her body up with Rapture parts, right? Like good stuff. And we're like, "Hey, why don't you come to the Ark and get some repairs or whatever?" And she's like, "No, I can't do it. I can't leave. I'm not gonna give up. I'm not gonna quit. I'm not gonna go down to the Ark until I'm done with all this shit." And we're like, "So Rapture parts, huh?" And she's like, "Yeah, about this point in my life, I'm just about 30% Rapture parts. And I'm going to continue to fight, and I'm going to save everyone. And you and me have a lot of common in that." And like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "We both want to save everyone, and we want to claim the surface, and we're going to do it no matter what." And that's why she mentions that she feels such a kindred spirit to us as the commander, and why she keeps coming to bail us out and help us out with stuff, because both of us are people who don't quit and will do anything to win, and just like push and push and push. And then at that point, some more time goes by, and we find a hot spring, and it's like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, it's awesome." So we go ahead and hop in the hot spring, and she's like, "I'm going to guard watch. I don't want to get in there with you." And we're like, "Ruh, ruh, ruh." But we're enjoying it. And then she talks about her weapons. So before she had her mind switch, she was like the armor for the goddess squad, and she made seven weapons. And these are the 7 dwarfs, right? Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, obviously. And Red Hood has one, and then later on, Rappy Red Hood has one, and there's some others. But she mentions that there's only 4 left that are able to work, and that she made each one so that they adapt specifically to the user and the combat situation, which is very impressive. And then we talk about how this seems to be a tourist spot because it's just the way it's set up and the hot spring and the kind of the ruins and whatnot. And then we see a car. And so Snow White is able to use her like tech capabilities to like fix it up so that we can like drive. So we drive it, and we mentioned her getting in the car too, but she's like, I would like 10 times as much as this car. I'll just run alongside. And so with the car, we're able to like make up like a lot of fucking time. So in about 3 hours, and don't ask questions about how the commander knows how to drive a car. We're just going to assume they drive cars in the Ark, I guess, which I think they do because they show roads and stuff sometimes. Anyway, so 3 hours later, we reach the elevator, and then another 100 raptors like swarm around the spot. And so she just like kicks us into the elevator and says like, I got this. I'll see you around. And then as the elevator door is like closing, we watch her just like beating the shit out of the raptors and everything. And then, you know, like the commander makes a comment to himself. He's like, all I see is blood and destruction and death, but Snow White is shining the purest white. The end. Pretty baller. Next up is Scarlett's Bond story, and Scarlett's Bond story starts pretty intensely. She's literally holding her sword to her throat. Rappy and Pravity are looking on, and then Scarlett warns them that if they approach, she's going to cut off her head. And then she steps in the elevator with us and is like, we're leaving. And then we go back in time 1 week, and we see Scarlett. She's visiting at the outpost, and she's apparently been coming quite often so she can get drunk with the counters and having a good time. And this time she brought some real fruit, and everyone's like, oh, sweet, nice. And then we go to 5 days ago, not 5 days ago from the week ago, 5 days ago from when we're getting kidnapped into the elevator. And then Scarlett's back for more drinking, and then we go to 3 days ago, and this time she brought venison, and she shows up drunk, but she wants to drink some more. And then we go to like 1 day ago, and this time she brings nothing, but she wants to drink. And then earlier today this event starts, she's back, and she's so drunk she's about to vomit. And then Ainz is like, you're such a fucking lightweight for someone who drinks all the time. And then Rappy gets like very concerned, and then all of a sudden, she mentions that the central government might notice like this pilgrim coming all the time, and they might be concerned and try to do something hasty. At that point, Pravity bursts in, as she does, and she's leading a crew. It's like, you are under arrest, Pilgrim. You have something, 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 something. And then Scarlett's like, oh, yeah? And so she grabs us, takes us hostage, and moves all the way back out to the elevator. And then we switch to, like, now we've all caught up. So now we're in the present, and the elevator takes us up to the surface. And she immediately is like, I'm sorry. So then the counters get in touch, and they mention that, like, well, the Pilgrim kidnapped you and took off, so like we're in the clear. They don't think we have any involvement with this, so we're not going to be held responsible. But we need to like meet up so that you can come back home eventually. Oh, and then so they want to come and get us, but meanwhile, we're kind of like moving around and doing some stuff, and Scarlett points at some cows that are nearby, and she's like, hey, I need you to distract those raptors away from the cows so that I can take care of them silently, and we can collect something over here. And we're like, I don't know about that. She's like, just run, I'll take care of it, you can trust me, wink wink. And so we do, and then as we're running away from the raptors, and we're about to be too exhausted to chase them anymore or get chased anymore, Scarlett like has killed them all with her melee weapon, like silently, and she's like, what up? And then she talks about how there used to be a bunch of like melee fighting Nikkes like her with swords, but then everyone died but one, and that's her. And she likes the fact that she's the only melee using Nikke because the Nikkes kind of all transitioned to using like mid-range weapons, and the raptors, because they're not just sitting around taking it, they have also evolved, but they didn't evolve to fight someone with a melee weapon. It's kind of the same stuff we get in Overzone. And so that puts her at a distinct advantage because she continues to get better, but they do not. Anyway, so getting back to the whole cow situation, the reason she wanted us to save the cows is because, cows are great and whatnot, but also she wants us to collect the manure. That's right. She's going to guard us against raptors while we collect manure. So we make a big pile of manure, and we're all stinky and dirty and whatnot. And then she like rolls up with like a wagon, and she's like, now put it on the wagon. And we're like, Jesus Christ, why are we doing this? And she's like, oh, hoo, 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 hoo. We're like, all right, Scarlett, God damn you. And so we put it all on the wagon, and then she whistles and walks along as we're like dragging the wagon, and then she like helps us with one hand, which is like 10 times stronger than we could be as a human. We eventually get to like this spring, this like nice area with like some flat ground, and it's very pleasant and quiet. And then we put the manure all over the ground and like the flat stuff. And And then at that point, Scarlett's like starts talking about being on the surface and how beautiful it is and everything. And then we see a frog, and she's like, "Go ahead, pick it up." And we pick it up, and we're like, "Oh, that's nice." And then we go take a bath in the spring. And Scarlett comes over and gives us an apple, but she's like, "Hey, make sure you wash your hands real good." And we're like, "Oh yeah." We were doing manure, and she's like, "Yep, manure." Also, that frog was poisonous. Like, Jesus Christ, Scarlett, the fuck. And then, okay, so once we do that, she gives us the apple, and it's like one of the most delicious things we've ever had, because we're used to just having apple-flavored Splendibin, but now it's like a real one. It's like, oh, this is magnificent. This is so good. And then we see her out, like, working in this, like, manure patch, and we're like, hold up, are you farming? And she's like, yeah. And so she talks about it, and she mentions that she does this all the time. She's a wanderer, you know, we bring that up, and she's like, oh, yeah, so I get these farms started, these little, like, patches of area where I grow things, and I just kind of let them keep going as I leave, and then hopefully, you know, this is like our way of like reclaiming part of the surface to make sure everyone can be okay. And then talking to Rapunzel last time they were talking, there's been like a ton of these like cleared lands where like her and Rapunzel, and I feel like a much lesser extent Snow White, are like making these reclamation patches essentially of the surface where people someday will be able to return. And then we watch her, and she continues to farm and farm and farm, and then she asks us a question. She's like, do you think humans are going to make the surface better? And then she points at everything, and she's like, this is, you know, without humans around, everything is so beautiful, it's so quiet, there's no like gross cities and overpopulation or any of that kind of stuff. And then we kind of talk back and forth with her about like her feelings, and she's like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to reclaim the surface for the humans and let them take over. And then she smirks and is like, if the central government heard me talk like this, they would definitely get me killed. Yeah, despite how she feels, she's definitely going to keep helping the humans. So then the next day, we chill here for a bit, and then the next day, we find out that we still have like another day before the counters can come up and collect us because of like whatever they got to do. And Scarlett's like, that's good, I still got some more work to do. But first, or she's like, I'm done with all my work, so now it's time to get drunk. And we're like, okay, cool, where's the liquor? And she's like, we got to make our own liquor, and we're going to make honey wine because it's super easy. And so she's like, there's a beehives over there, so we're going to go, and I'm going to light a torch and smoke all the bees out, and then you're going to grab some honeycomb, and then we can make this stuff. And so as we're trying to grab the honeycomb with this whole like crazy plan that she has, we bump into the bees, and the bees like all gather together to like come and kill us, and we're like, ruh-roh, and then Scarlett's like, don't move, and then she kills all the bees with her sword, and it's like, damn. Jesus. And then she cuts off a little piece of the honeycomb. She's like, try this. And we're like, God, this is so good. And she's like, you bet it is. And then she talks about the strongest, the fittest, the strongest of the fittest, or the survival of the fittest and the strongest. And then we kind of like tease her about that because it's like, well, you're helping the humans, so clearly they should not be surviving. And she's like, it's fine. It's like a commitment I made, and I'm going to go through with it or whatnot. And then she reiterates that she's here to reclaim the surface and destroy the raptures and help humanity take it back over again. And then at that point, she's like, all right, enough talk about this shit. Let's make some liquor. So some time goes by. We get like the honeyed liquor or the honey wine, and then we start drinking. And at first it's like, oh, it just feels kind of buzzy, right? It's like nice. It's not that bad, right? And we're like, yeah, that sounds good. And then several hours later, we're both getting like hammered drunk. And then she continues to talk about life on the surface, about how she doesn't like the Ark and has no interest in going there. And then at some point we like pass out. And then we wake up, and we see that Scarlett is sitting there, like, crying a bit. So we move on over and cuddle up with her, and then we fall asleep again as she talks about how the surface is her like paradise, her Elysium. That like she loves being here, she loves having like all this open space and not having anyone else around and whatnot, and how it's the best thing ever. And then we wake up the next day, and we find that Rappy, Ainz, and Nian are there. They've like come to get us, and all the raptures in the entire vicinity are dead, and we're like in a totally different place. So Scarlett clearly like moved us in the night, and then left us and like cleared the whole place out so that we'd be protected. And also there's a box full of stuff. There's a box full of meat and fruit and wine, like all real stuff, no Splendibin bullshit either. And Ainz is like, it's dollar signs in her eyes. She's like, oh my God, this would sell for so much back in the Ark. And then we're like, no, this is for us. This is a gift. This is a gift from the surface. And that's in her Bond story. All right, so the last pioneer is Rapunzel. And she's horny as shit. That comes up a lot. I don't want to keep bringing it up, but like every time anything happens, she's like thinking lewd thoughts or talking about lewdness. I'll bring it up a couple times, actually. It's pretty funny. But that's the whole thing, right? It's like a juxtaposition because she's like a priestess or like, you know, a woman of the cloth who just heals and doesn't really fight, quote unquote. But then she's like horny as she's like wet. She's got that like, what is that dumbass song? Wet ass pussy. That's something like that. Anyway, so we start off with the counters and the commander. They get caught in a sandstorm. And then once the counters get to safety, they're like, all right, we did it. We got away from the sandstorm and we're hunkered down. And they look around and like, oh, God damn it, Commander's gone. We wake up later on our own with a dry mouth. And it's like, oh, well, apparently we got caught in the storm. And then we look up and Rapunzel's about to give us a smooch for like some mouth-to-mouth, of course. Yeah, right, that's what she wants. And again, this chica is like thirsty as shit. So we thank her for saving us, and she mentions that she cannot contact the counters right now because the alpha particles in the area are way too strong. So she's going to take us to a nearby radio tower because radio towers allow us to like cut through that apparently. So the first time this has come up. And so we meander over to this radio tower, and we were able to contact the counters. At that point, Rapunzel mentions that there's a lot of raptures in the area, and so she takes the phone and texts the counters that we should meet somewhere else, so she knows somewhere else to meet. And she also texts that she wants pictures of the counters' panties. Lord Rapunzel, come on. What are you doing? So we end up traveling with her some more, and at some point she's like, oh, I have a spot over here where we can camp for a few hours away from like any raptures or any danger or whatnot. And we're like, yeah, we're real thirsty. And she's like, oh, cool. Yeah, I know where there's water around here. And she goes and gets some water. And she's like, sorry, I tried to find food, but all the food's, there's like no food left here. And the water is kind of running out. And we start talking about how she just like wanders around, and she has like this whole place like mapped out so that she knows where to get supplies or where good resting places are and stuff. A bit later, after we set up camp, we get into a conversation about, and this, for those of you who saw the Overzone video a couple weeks ago, that her hair, each piece of hair is like a disruptor for like the Rapture's ability to like detect anything. And so she just kind of reaffirms that here. Again, this is the first time the Commander's hearing about it. So she talks about how her hair is a jamming signal for all the Raptures. And that no matter what, they will like not see her or spy her or anything. So they're totally safe in this area. Like, it's a fucking sweet ability to have on the surface. And then she does some more kind of like trying to get some loot stuff going on. Snuggling with us while we're trying to sleep, stuff like that. And then we're having a hard time falling asleep because, you know, it's just not a comfortable situation. And so she's like, oh, well, let me read you a book. And she pulls out this book that's like a book about war. And then she starts describing like the war, and then it gets like lewd real fast. We're like, Rapunzel. And she's like, okay, I may have added a few things. And she's like, a few. And then, so we finally kind of like drift off, and then we wake up a little bit later and we hear her confessing her sins in prayer. And that confession turns into her like getting herself off while thinking about the Commander banging her. Jesus. The next day, she checks in with us before we move out. And Rapunzel asks if it's okay for us to go take a detour. And we're like, yeah, sure, why not? And so she takes us to this battleground. And it's like, everyone's dead, right? All the Raptures, all the Nikkes are dead. And so then she goes around to each one of the Nikkes and prays for them. And as she prays for them, like golden light comes and she absorbs it in like her like, not her crucifix, in her like rosary or whatever. And we're like, hey, what's going on with that? And she explains that it's the nymph. She absorbs the nymph, and she gets to experience like their memories and whatnot. And then she likes to take each one of these nymphs to like the Nikke's hometown, but that she only has a year to do it. And then she explains some more that these older models, like the pilgrims and stuff, they didn't have as much storage space as like current Nikke's, right? This is something else that has come up. And so she really has like a year of memory before she has to delete the memory. So whenever she absorbs one of these nymphs and gains like their memories, she only has like a year to go check it out. And the problem with the lack of memory, is that if the memory gets too full, if she overfills it, then she'll have a mind switch, and that can be pretty bad. And the only thing she does keep in her memory, that's like her experiences, are like these like 5 years worth of time or something from like her early memories, and everything else gets erased after a year. So then we ask her to tell us about the past. So she starts recalling like the first invasion. She takes some cajoling to get her to do that. But she explains that during the first Rapture invasion, that, you know, the whole of humanity was like in a dire straits, and that they really needed to find some way to fight back. And so they had the Nikke program, but they had to find suitors, which suitors were just people who could be turned into Nikkes. And so they like analyzed everybody, and they found a few girls that could, including Rapunzel. But the other ones were Snow White, Scarlet, Red Hood, Lilith. And then she talks a little bit more about Lilith. Lilith was the leader, and she was like a big sister to everybody. Talks about Scarlet, that even though Scarlet was the most bloodthirsty or battle-thirsty out of all of them, that Lilith could still beat her. And then she talks a little bit more about Snow White. Snow White was like a cute little guy, and then she was super fun and all this stuff, which is like completely different than the Snow White we know. And we're like, holy shit, what happened? Let's see. Oh, and because she had a mind switch, and then she remembers the commander, like the greatest commander or whatever, and how he was both serious and childlike at the same time. And also mentions that he was the first commander. So, the first Nikke squad was the Pilgrims, and then he was the first commander of them, obviously. And that at some point he entered the Ark, and that she's not even sure if he's still alive anymore because it was so long ago. So we discussed these memories with her, and that she mentions that she'll never give them up. Like they're the most precious thing to her that she has. And it starts to get late, and so we lay down to rest. And as we're falling asleep, she walks off, and we hear her like crying off in the distance. A few days later, or a bit later, we eventually reach this flowery field, and it's filled with raptures. Rapunzel mentions that this is the hometown, that like the hometown, obviously, it's however long it's been, it's like completely gone at this point, but that she can still do a little grave site for it. So she holds our hand as we walk through like this field full of raptures, and none of them detect or even look over at us. And then she strides right there into the center, and she creates like a little grave. She like inserts the nymph into the ground, and then takes out a couple of like strands of her hair and puts them down, and talks about how like her hair will stay active until the nymph is fully like disintegrated, so that the raptures won't be able to affect this grave at all. A bit later, we finally reach the rendezvous point, and it's there that we spot the counters. And Rapunzel is, talking to us, and she's like, "Well, goodbye. I'll miss you, and I'll always pray for you. But you should get going." She then embraces us, and at that point, Neon and Ainz look over at us, and like, "Hey!" And we like turn to like wave at them, and as we turn back to say goodbye to Rapunzel one more time, she's already gone. And all that we have left, she pulls us into her bosom, so we're like facing her breasts and all that. Anyway, the only thing that's left is her smell on the air and some hairs. And that wraps up Rapunzel's Bond story. And the event for this week is Queen's Order. It focuses heavily on Rosanna, who is the head of Hedonia and one of the underground queens. So it begins, Rosanna is stealing candy from a kid, and the kid's complaining, and the dad's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, please forgive me," doesn't know what he does, and all this stuff, because this guy like runs the restaurant that she's hanging out in, and is, he's one of like Rosanna's employees. And then she's like, "No, I like it," so she gives it back to the kid, and she tells the dad, "Hey, you got to make sure this kid becomes big and strong someday so he can be a part of our crew and everything be great. Like, I love his attitude and how he doesn't put up the bullshit." At that point, her consigliere mentions the red grass. And the red grass is it's like a new up-and-coming gang. And how they've been buying like bombs, like a whole bunch of bombs. And that they possibly have some backing from someone in the Ark. At that point, we talk about that. There's like a woman with like a scarf that kind of talks about like getting food or bringing her Rosanna food and whatnot. And Rosanna's like, "Yeah, that sounds good." And then the door opens to the place, and there's a bomb. And Rosanna's like, "Fuck, maybe I should take this bomb thing more seriously." At that point, there's an explosion. Meanwhile, a bit later, over at the outpost, the commander is just hanging out alone. And then we get a message from Sakura, and she's like, "Hey, have you seen Rosanna?" We're like, "No." And she's like, "Okay, stay out of that room." And like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Don't worry about it." And then we look up from our message, and there's Rosanna, and she's like, she passes the fuck out. So we call Mary to come check on her, and Mary's, does a little evaluation and decides that like, hey, she's gonna be okay, but like she's gonna need some support. And then as she's about to leave, she's like, "Hey, you need to be careful." We go back to check on Rosanna, and she's already woken up. And so she's like, "Hey, we gotta go. We can't stay here for long. We gotta go right now." And so as we're about to head out, Rosanna stops us. She grabs her gun and tells us to get down, and then the firefight commences. After Rosanna kills everybody, or knocks them all out because Nikke's can't kill human, she grabs us and we go. We're able to we have to dodge around this part of the outpost so that we can get to the elevator, so we can get out of the outpost and get to the Ark. So we're able to evade bullets, avoid getting shot, move around, and eventually get to the elevator. At that point, she finally fills us in. She tells us that the restaurant she was in got blown up, and that it could have been anybody in that room, because she has a lot of people who want to get would like to take her position or cause some damage, and there's a lot of dumb gangs and whatnot, and she swears that whoever did this to her, she's going to find them and get revenge. So at that point, we get out of the elevator, And at first she's like, okay, I don't see anything. No one's shooting at us. Let's be cautious. We move out, and then some guys pop out, and so she has to shoot them too. And then we're talking about like, all right, now these guys are down. What should we do? And it's like, hey, maybe we should contact Sakura. She contacted us right before this whole fucking thing went down. And so we do. So Rosanna, who doesn't have her phone, she lost it. She takes our phone and reaches out to Sakura, who has a safe house nearby where we can go. So once we get there, Sakura shows up by herself to prove to Rosanna that she's not the one betraying and that she can be trusted and not causing any issues. And she's got this super sexy like ninja outfit on, and we actually have a discussion about it, right? Like, it's just obviously like when this event came out, this was like, hey, you want to buy this costume? It's $20. But then they include it into the story, which is always nice. And they do it twice. There's someone else with a costume that gets brought up as well. And then Sakura talks about how like the Nikke got a warning letter saying you better not get involved with whatever is going on with Hedonia, and that Sakura also fills us in that there's people in the Outer Rim who are like members of Hedonia that are talking about Hedonia's clearing house and there's new leadership and all this stuff, and it clearly seems like someone's trying to take over the other Underworld queens. And then we talk about Moron, if you remember from Sakura, she's kind of dummy, and they're like, no, we're trying to be sneaky and figure some stuff out and do that, so we're absolutely not going to call her because she's going to relieve it. And then we get a spelling error in the game. So instead of calling it the Red Grass, they call it the Red Gas Group as that gang, and I was like, oh, one of these is wrong. But then later on, the Red Grass gets brought up again, so I'm assuming the Red Gas is the error. So the Red Grass Group, they talk about how like their headquarters are in the Ark, and that Rosanna is going to go check that out while Sakura goes to the Outer Rim to kind of like see what's going on there and to kind of like protect and make sure things are going to be all right. And then Rosanna is like, hey, I want you to go to Sakura. It's going to be safer for you with her. And she's got her whole like crew of the Sammeki. And we're like, no, we refuse. We're going to go with you. And there's some back and forth, but finally she agrees that she can come, that we can go with her. And part of it is like calling her out, being like, hey, you said you'd protect us. Are you not able to protect us? Are you that weak? And she's like, don't you fucking dare. And then Sakura tells us to contact her if anything comes up, and if we're in danger or whatever, and that she'll come no matter what. So we track the Red Grass headquarters through some back alleys in the Ark, and then we finally find them, and there's a couple guards like sitting outside it. And so Rosanna asks us about acting and how our acting skills are, and if we're up for like a game to play. And we're like, sure, what are we gonna do? And she's like, you're gonna pretend that you caught me and you're bringing them to Red Grass and you're gonna drag me out here and stuff. And we're like, cool, sounds good. And then we get like a shot of the two guards just like talking about nothing, and then we just like wander out there without Rosanna or anything. We're just like, hey, what's up? And they're like, hey, what do you want? And we're like, oh shit, this isn't working. And then we run back, and Rosanna's kind of laughing about it, and then she like pretends to be unconscious so we can drag her back out. Oh goodness. Okay, and then oh yeah, so then at some point the guys get like really sketched out, and they call their crew, and the crew comes, and there's like a shootout, and Rosanna takes care of everybody. Sorry, before we implement this plan, I forgot to mention that Rosanna is like, I trust you. I've only trusted one other person. And we're like, oh, who's that? And she's like, it's the guy who ran Hedonia before me. And then at some point, he sold my head to be a Nikke to get out of debts or something. Or he sold my head, but didn't realize I was going to become a Nikke. So when I was like reborn, I came back and I cut that guy's head off and took over. And so it's clearly she's talking about her dad that she had to like take over for the most mafioso like fucking way possible. All right. Sorry, so moving back. So then after they call their buddies to kind of help with the battle, Rosanna pops up and like murks them all. Essentially the best way, it just knocks them all down. And then there's one guy left, and she's like, we need to figure out what's going on. So she grabs the guy, and oh yeah, the guards Rosanna starts interrogating, and apparently the boss of this gang like went to the wall, and then Rosanna finally like kind of tortures him a little bit and figures out that the wall is the barrier between the Outer Rim and the Ark, and that it seems like these guys want to blow up the barrier so they can like escape the Outer Rim into the Ark. And then she like knocks this guy out for good after she like talks a lot of shit to him and stuff. And then we got to head back to the safe house. So once we're back at the safe and contact Sakura. So first thing we do is when we get back to the safe house, we see that Moron's there. And she's like, why did you guys tell him anything? And then both Sakura and Rosanna talk a lot of shit towards Moron. And then finally Moron's like, well, I got something for you. And so she hands Sakura a phone, and it's the consigliere she survived. And we find out that most of the guys died. The guy with the dad of the kid died, but that some of them got away. And then she asks about the like anybody going around saying whatever, and the girl with the ribbon comes up, and apparently she's the one who betrayed Hedonia, and she's the one who was like running around saying that new things were going to happen and whatnot. And so then Rosanna's like, make it happen, and the consigliere kills her right there over the phone. And then she's like, all right, we got to discuss a plan to figure out what to do next. At that point, her and Sakura get into an interesting conversation, because there's like the Underground Queens are there for a very specific reason, and that's essentially keep order in the Outer Rim so that the Ark never comes and like destroys it. Essentially, it's like protect the people out of the ring, but also protect the Ark. And Sakura is getting concerned that like Rosanna's desire to get revenge or to like get vindication or whatever she says is going to get in the way of them performing their duties. But then Rosanna kind of like walks her through the whole thing. She's like, no, these guys are they got bombs, they're trying to blow up the barrier. If they do that, the Ark's going to like go into the Outer Rim and like clear house, because like all the Ark's like itching for like an excuse that's going to be like publicly viable to go and just kill everyone in the Outer Rim, because they're already like outcasts and they're just causing problems. They don't benefit anybody at all. And so with that, Sakura and Moron are both like, all right, the Penne Association with Moron and the Sayameke with Sakura like agreed to like the stated plan that Rosanna's going to go stop this guy and get revenge, so everything goes smoothly. And this is going to follow the dictates that are the directive that Mustang gave them. And then at this point, she's like, hey, you're going to stay here. I'm going to go take care of this. And we're like, and she's like, no. I'll come talk to you afterwards. Don't worry. Like, I got this. And we're like, okay, fine. We agree. And then she gives us a big old smooch. And heads out. And then at this point, we switch over to like the history of the head of the Redgrass gang, and we just learned that he was born in the Outer Rim. He had a lot of bitterness. His dad died when he was like 6, and he like found a way to like finally get to the Ark, but he had to stay undercover. And then at some point, he started his own gang, and at some point, he did some work for like a wealthy person in the Ark, and that she provided him with money, and then he's gonna use these bombs, and he's very idealistic and like, I'm gonna blow up this barrier, and then we're all gonna be able to see light and all this other bullshit. And then it kind of goes to like the present, and he's walking towards the barrier with these bombs. And then Rosanna shows up, and she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, you survived. I'll get you. And she's like, nope, I'm going to stop you right now. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to blow both of us up. And then he goes, bah, and nothing happens. And she's like, you think I wouldn't have fucking disarmed the bombs before I like fucking came over here? And in my head, I'm like, when did you do that? But she did, so the bombs don't go off. And then she talks some mad shit to this guy and whatnot, and then like the members of Hedonia like come out of the shadows, and she's like, fucking end this dude. And so they do. So good stuff. Meanwhile, so she got her vengeance. Meanwhile, we head back to our room, and we wait a while for Rosanna. She doesn't show up. Like a day or so goes by, and then Emma shows up, and she's wearing like a secretary costume, which we point out, and she said that Ingrid sent her over here to tell us that there was some like shady stuff that we were like presumably involved with, and that there was like questions about Perilous Siege getting involved. And remember, Perilous Siege like assassinates humans, but then Ingrid was like, nah, it's unnecessary to do that. And then we're like, Emma, why are you dressed up like a secretary? And she's like, oh, I'm doing secretary work for Ingrid, so I dressed up like her secretary. Isn't it cute? And we're like, yes, you're very attractive with your giant breasts. At that point, and then as she's leaving, she's like, hey, the person you're waiting for, she's okay, don't worry about it. And we're like, okay, that's good to know. So later on in that day, it's like nighttime, and we're just kind of thinking and wondering if Rosanna's ever going to show up. And then she shows up, but she's also got the consigliere and some plutocrat. And the plutocrat is the lady who gave the money to the guy to use the bombs. And so she gets killed by the consigliere for giving money to the Redgrass, causing this whole thing in the first place. And I guess the consigliere takes that plutocrat and like disappears, because then Rosanna gives us like another big smoochie. And then she talks about how she loves us, and how if someone did something to hurt us, she would like lose her shit, and the vengeance she got this day would be like no match for the vengeance. Like it'd be exciting to see how much like vengeance she would take on people who affected her in that regards. And we're like, that sounds awesome. And she's like, yes, let us continue to be together. And we're like, okay. And then the kind of like the prologue. A few days later go by. A few days later, Rosanna like comes into our walks into our house, or walks into the commander's room and pulls out her gun and goes bang, but it's not bullets, it's white flowers. And we're like, oh, that's sweet. And she's like, yep, I'm gonna take you somewhere. So she drags us up to the surface, to this hill that's overlooking like this area, and it's very quiet. And then we notice there's a bunch of graves, a bunch of like white flowers over the place. And she mentions that this is the hidden cemetery of the Hedonia, that all the Hedonians are like, or all the members of the Hedonia mafia family get buried here. And when we talk about it being like an illegal but not legal, because the Ark would not be like pleased by this whole thing, but they have like no reach here in the surface at all. and that she wants the reason why she does this, the reason she has this cemetery up here, is because she wants like the members of Hedonia who predominantly come from that rim and have never seen like the sun to be able to experience the sun even in death, since they were never able to experience it in life. And then as we kind of walk quietly away, like through the cemetery and head back to the Ark, the sun sets in the background, and yeah, it's kind of like a sad thought project there. All right, to finish this up, we'll do Rosanna's Bond story. So Rosanna's out, and she's just getting gifts from people for like, oh, thank you for protecting my business and whatnot. And she's talking to the consigliere about stopping a human trafficking ring and all this stuff. And then she gets a letter. It's from Anthony. Anthony is the son of the former leader of Hedonia, the one that she beheaded. So like, I was totally wrong. She's not the daughter of that guy. That's just the guy who like. She was like associated, or she was in Hedonia before. Anyway, when she took over, so this guy Anthony wants revenge, and he says something. You killed my boss, so I'm going to kill yours. And then she's like, well, I can't be Mustang because he had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And like, I don't know if there's really like a connection there at all. And then she's like, oh shit, it's the commander. Meanwhile, over at the outpost, we're just chilling as we do in our room before crazy shit happens. Rosanna storms in, says she's going to stay here for 3 days, and then like no reasons given. She's like, nope, you're just going to stay here. We're not going to leave, do anything. And then she continues to avoid discussing why she's here, what's going on. We want to take a shower. She's going to like stand outside the shower and make sure we're okay. And then we're taking a shower and trying to relax, and all of a sudden we hear like broken glass and gunfire and stuff. And we come out and she sees our like muscles, which she refers to later as being very attractive. And she just laughs off the whole thing. She's like, oh, isn't this crazy? Random shit, right? And we're like, what? And then at some point, she hears something in the hallway later on. And so she goes out there, and then she comes back, and there was like a man with like a rope wire who's coming in to get us or whatever. And we're like, all right, Rosanna, you got to tell us the fuck's going on. And then she brings up like the bunny kiss from the previous event like 2 weeks ago. And she's like, well, let's play a game. If I win, I get smooches. If you win, I'll give you all the answers you want. And so we lose completely, so it's smoochy time. A bit later on, we're like getting the couch set up to go to bed, and Rosanna's like, what are you doing? And we're like, oh, you're going to take the bed, and I'm going to take the couch because I'm a good host. And she's like, go sleep in the bed, you dumbass. I'm going to stay up all night anyway. And like, I'm a fucking Nikke, like, well, who cares? And we like argue about that for a little bit, and then finally like, all right, fine, I'll go to sleep. The next day, Rosanna gets a call from the consigliere, and the issue has been taken care of. Anthony's Dunsies, and the commander is safe. So she finally tells us everything that's been going on. And then we like ask her if like, hey, is every day like this and whatnot? She's like, well, not every day, but a lot of them. And we're like, well, we want to help you. And she's like, no. And it's like, well, can we at least hang out? And she's like, sure, come to this restaurant later. And she gives us the address of one of the restaurants that she like owns, or that Hedonia owns or whatever. So a bit later we head there, and then she's like really mad that we showed up and we're hanging out or whatever. And then she reveals that unlike Sakura and Moron, who use like peacekeeping methodologies to like control stuff, or they make deals and do a lot of diplomacy, everything's violent. She's extremely violent. She's like, no, if something goes on, it's time for people to die. And this makes it so she has a lot of targets in her back. Like, we don't care, we want to hang out with you, and we believe in you, and we know that you'll keep us safe and whatever. And we like call her shit out, where it's like, oh, you don't think we can keep us safe? And she's like, all right, whatever. So then she pours some booze, and we start eating and drinking and stuff. She brings up another game. This game is like a question. It's just like question answer. She's like, I ask a question and I'll answer it. And I'm like, that's not really a game. That's just like normal conversation. Anyway, so we find out that Rosanna was born from like a noble person from like the Royal Road, and then a prostitute down here in the Outer Rim. And so her father very obviously like abandoned her. And then the mother like died at like a young age, and so she was taken in by like the gangster lifestyle and everything, blah blah blah. Then eventually she was beheaded and became a Nikke and came back and took over Hedonia. So we flirt a little bit. We discuss having relationships and like girlfriends, boyfriend, all that kind of stuff. And then the Underworld queens, and then we talked to her about the limits, like how is she able to kill humans, because most Nikkes are not allowed to kill humans. She says that inside their limiters, for all three of them, Sakura, Morin, and her, that they have exceptions, that if something's interfering with their mission, like if a human's interfering with the mission, they're allowed to kill them based on like needing to control like the underground and take care of everything and whatnot. And also she can order like the members of her gang to kill people too. So that's fun. So we have a good time, and then we agree to meet the next day. And she's like, all right, I'm going to send some escorts with you just in case. So we get escorted out to like Rosanna's private vehicle when we get ambushed. And so we get shot in the shoulder and like the knee, and the escorts get knocked down. And as we're passing out, we hear Rosanna yelling. and more gunshots and whatnot. The next day, or just kind of later on, we wake up in a hospital room, and Rosanna's there. She's yelling at her consigliere about what happened, and she's like, "This is your fault. You said Anthony was taken care of, blah, 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 blah." And Rosanna's like, "Well, there's punishment." And consigliere's like, "Roger." And so she shoots consigliere in the shoulder where we got shot, and she's like, "All right, take care of this fucking shit, and make sure Anthony's taken care of." And like, there's still some like lingering bullshit around that and whatnot. So the consigliere leaves. Rosanna then notices that we're awake. She's super pissed off. She apologizes, talks about it's time for revenge, that she's going to make sure this guy pays and that nothing like this is ever going to happen again. And then we discuss still wanting to have like a thing with her. They do some smoochie and some segs, of course. So we chat about that. And then she starts undressing us, and it fades to black because we fuck her. Meanwhile, in the hallway, the consigliere is talking to like some of her subordinates, and she's describing how the revenge, and it's this really long diatribe about how like we're gonna like end these people, and anyone who gets in the way, and anybody like loosely associated with it, they're all gonna die, and we're gonna fucking kill them all, and it's gonna be fantastic. And her subordinate's like, "Are you worried that this is taking it a bit far? Like it's gonna break the rules that we have like with Tetra and everything else?" And the consigliere mentions that no, I'm very good at my job. In fact, I'm so good that everything's like wrapped up nice and tight, and I have justification for everything that we're gonna do. Everything I just described to you is 100% legal under the terms of like the Tetra Corporation. I'd like the charter of like the Underworld Queens and whatnot. And they're like, excellent. So they pick up their guns and they run off to execute vengeance. And that ends that. And that is the, I think this is week 14 of the events / Bond stories. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you next week for the episode, actually, the main campaign side story 1, which is like, it's kind of like a chapter 14.5. This takes place right after the previous one, focusing purely on the pilgrims and Marion. And then we'll pick up with the next event, which is See You Later, I think. Oh no, it's like Blue Skies or something. Anyway, it's one of the summer events with like swimsuits. The week after that. All right, cool. So catch y'all later. Bye.